Hello and welcome to A Critical Dragon, where I talk about narrative in film, television, and in books. And this is going to be the second video on the prologue of Midnight Tides. And I kind of lied. There's going to be a third one. It's not just two videos. But I swear this is a very, very short one. It's short for me, at least. It's short for me. But what I want to do in this video is just have a look at the description of Scabandari Bloodeye and the description of Silchas Ruin when they're introduced in this prologue, because I think it is a fascinating example of using the same style, the same technique, this idea of echoing to show you the points of connection, but also to emphasize the differences. And it's a wonderful little, very short, I swear, very short for me. Look at this. So this is the description of Scabandari Bloodeye as he is assembled into his Teast Eater form from his iron-hued draconian form. So a moment later, he assembled into his Teast Eater form, skin the shade of hammered iron, long grey hair unbound, a gaunt, aquiline face with hard, close-set eyes, a broad, downturned mouth that bore no lines of laughter, high, unlined brow, diagonally scarred livid white against the dusky skin. He wore a leather harness bearing his two-handed sword, a brace of long knives at his hip, and hanging from his shoulders a scaled cape, the hide of a matron, fresh enough to still glisten with natural oils. He stood, a tall figure sheathed in droplets of blood, watching the legions assemble. Eater officers glanced his way, then began directing their troops. So this is, we already know what he looks like as a dragon, with the iron-hued wings, the ice blue, the cold blue, draconian eyes. And this is our first glimpse of Scabandari Bloodeye as an actual Teast Eater. So skin the shade of hammered iron. So again, this greyness, but linking it to iron, cold, hard, the thing that a weapon is made of. And it's hammered, that it has been violently shaped. Long grey hair unbound. There's a wildness to this. It is not perfectly coiffed. It's not in a fancy style. It is wild. It is unbound. It is not limited in any way. And he is gaunt, a gaunt aquiline face. So he's not fat. He's not pudgy. He has that, when we think of, I suppose the Teast really are the Malazan equivalent of elves with these very sharp, high cheekbones. So that's what we're getting a sense of here. But gaunt as in this hungry look. But what I find interesting is aquiline face. So he has that Roman patrician, noble leader kind of mien, that he is being described with those sharp lines, those sharp angles, everything about him, iron, sharpness. This is giving you a sense, again, of physicality reflecting or implying character. So an aquiline face, a noble face with hard, close-set eyes. So again, emphasizing this hardness, and then close-set. This, while, yes, it's a physical feature, but it seems to suggest a narrowness of vision, that he has close-set eyes, narrow field of vision, that he's not far-thinking, that he can't see broadly, that he is very focused. And that's what, it's a little subtle thing worked into this description. A broad, downturned mouth. So the kind of sad, grumpy face. He has a sad, grumpy face. But a broad, downturned mouth that bore no lines of laughter. So we would say laughter lines that bore no laughter lines, but no lines of laughter. That it's that rhythm given to the sentence. Downturned mouth that bore no lines of laughter. You get that iambic sense. But why emphasize no laughter lines? He's cold, he's hard, he's serious. This isn't someone who is going to go, yeah, let's go for a drink and have a bit of a laugh and we'll chat about old times. This is a very serious, stern individual. And that when we read that with Aquilin, when we think of that patrician shape, when we think of that noble, this is the cold, hard commander of an army. A high, unlined brow. So we think of the worry lines that you get. He doesn't have worry lines. He doesn't worry about things. Diagonally scarred, livid white against the dusky skin. So again, emphasizing this aspect of him being a warrior, that he's bearing scars. And dusky skin, we know he's teist dur, hammered iron. He has this grey skin. He wore a leather harness bearing his two-handed sword, a brace of long knives at his hip, and hanging from his shoulders a scaled cape. So a leather harness bearing his two-handed sword. So we get this idea of he has a big weapon, but he has a large sword, a two-handed sword. This is a big, impressive weapon, but it's also accompanied by a brace of long knives that he carries at his hip. So he is heavily armed, but he's not covered in very prominent armor. This is just a leather harness bearing his two-handed sword and a brace of long knives. That we're not getting a sense of all of the armor that he's wearing just from this opening. And hanging from his shoulders, a scaled cape. So again, if you think of that typical fantasy image of the person standing, he's flown down as a dragon, landed on this point overlooking everything, turned into his teist eater form, and he's standing there looking out, and his cloak is slowly billowing in the wind, and his hair is billowing in the wind. It's Fabio, the eater. But he has a scaled cape. And you go, well, okay, that's fine. Scaled cape, again, emphasizing the reptilian, the draconian aspect. And then we get to a truly horrifying description. The hide of a matron, fresh enough to still glisten with natural oils. We know the Kachin Chamal matrons, they might be lizards, they might be dinosaurs. They are sentient. He's skinned a sentient being and is wearing their skin as a cloak. And it's not that he had it cured and turned into it. He skinned them and put it on essentially raw. That this happened such a short time ago that it is still glistening with natural oils. This is horrific and frightening and brutal, to skin an enemy and wear them as a cloak. If that is not telling you about Scabandari Bloodeye, I don't know what will. He stood, a tall figure sheathed in droplets of blood. As he was flying down, we heard about all of the misting of blood that he flew through. And as he assembled into his teist eater form, as he's become this humanoid form, that blood is still attached to him. He's covered head to toe in blood. So, and wearing a cloak made from an enemy's skin. Like he's a frightening, monstrous figure that is hard, hammered iron, and grey, and steely, and cold, and draconian, reptilian. And I think this is a very interesting sort of description. And now, short time afterwards, obviously we see Silchas Ruin is coming down to land next to his ally, and we're going to get Silchas described by Erikson. Scabandari watched his ally approach, stepping back only when the huge dragon settled onto the hilltop and then quickly sembled. a head or more taller than the teased eater soul taken, yet terribly gaunt, muscles bound like rope beneath smooth, almost translucent skin. Just going to pause here. So Scabandari watches his ally approach, and instead of stepping back to give him space, he waits until Silchas is actually landing before stepping back to give him some room. So this is quite an aggressive description of Scabandari. That yeah, his allies coming in. Instead of like stepping back, going, yeah, there's loads of room for you. He waits and goes, no, you land there. And once you're landed, right, now I'll step back to give you room when you don't need it anymore. This is this very passive-aggressive way of asserting a level of dominance. I will not step back when you need me to. I will step back when I am good and ready. So I thought that was a nice little moment at the beginning there. And then we have this very interesting point of contrast or comparison between the two. A head or more taller than the teased eater soul taken, yet terribly gaunt, muscles bound like rope beneath smooth, almost translucent skin. So everything about Scabandari had been described as this powerful giant, like he had huge wings, he was a big, powerful figure. And here we have a dragon and a soul taken, Silchas Rune, who, if anything, is even larger, is even more powerful, is the implication. And when he turns into his Teast Andy form, he's taller. And it's an old trope, but this idea of height, that he's the taller one. So again, it's a physical dominance of the other. And for Scabandari, from what we have seen of him thus far, I don't think he enjoys someone being taller or more powerful than him. And where Scabandari was described as having a gaunt face, here we have Silchas being described, his entirety is gaunt. That he is muscles bound like rope. This idea of the whipcord muscles. There isn't an ounce of fat on him. He is tall. He is lithe. He has that. Everything about him is just thin, powerful muscle. Whereas by implication, then Scabandari might have a gaunt face, but you know he's more smoothed out. He had a smooth forehead. Everything about him is smooth. Whereas you get an idea that Silchas Rune is, he has his beach body ready. Like he is heavily muscled. That's all there is to him. Scabandari might need another couple of months in the gym to get that kind of shape. So again, there's this comparison or contrast between the two, where Silchas is being presented as more powerful. He is taller. He is heavily muscled, but it is economical muscle. It's not big bulging muscles. It's everything about it is about the economy. And he has smooth, almost translucent skin. And we saw in the description of Scabandari has the dusky skin that has these white tracings of scars. But there's no mention of scars here on Silchas Rune. Now, we do get further down that he bore wounds, and we're going to find out about that. But he isn't covered in scarring the same way that Scabandari is. Talons from some raptor gleamed in the warrior's thick, long white hair. So we have an interesting point of comparison. They both have long hair. They both have it sort of waving around. But here, Silchas has talons wound into or connected to, almost like fetishes, in his hair, whereas Scabandari has nothing. It's flowing free. So part of Silchas's look is that there is control. He has, yes, he's used talons. He's used something, quite brutal, hunter-gatherer symbols of danger and predatory. but he's used that to bind his hair, to tie back his hair. So there is control to it, even if it is with an element of violence. Whereas Scabandari, no control. There's nothing there. It's all wild. The red of his eyes seemed feverish, so brightly did it glow. Scabandari had ice blue, draconian eyes. Silchas is being described as having almost glowing red eyes, feverish, that there's almost like an illness, an energy to them that is slightly ill, is slightly unnerving. So brightly did it glow. And this is curious. When we think of it, the red eyes, we think of just the color eye, the way that maybe someone, one of us, we could wear tinted lenses and have our iris color being red. But we actually get a sense here, because they are soul taken, because they are these magical beings, his eyes are actually glowing. And the idea of glowing eyes is a subtle, either of infernal, but a subtle idea of power. It could be infernal, it could be passion, it could be any of these things, but it is an idea of power emanating forth. He is so powerful, his eyes are glowing. This idea of so much power pent up inside, it is leaking out of his eyes. Whereas Scabandari, ice cold, blue, draconian eyes, they weren't glowing, they're just cold. So we get a sense, Silchas Ruin, red, passion, Scabandari, cold, passionless. Silchas Ruin, about emotion, Scabandari, much more calculating. So that is a subtle thing that's being worked in here. Silchas Ruin bore wounds, sword slashes across his body. Most of his upper armor had fallen away, revealing the blue-green of his veins and arteries tracking branching paths beneath the thin, hairless skin of his chest. Where Scabandari has not been described as having a lot of wounds, he has old wounds, scars. Silchas is covered in cuts, that he has been slashed. He is violently wounded, and this is very obvious. And his legs were slick with blood, as were his arms. So there's even this idea that he's covered in blood, Scabandari's covered in blood, but a lot of what maybe Silchas is covered in is his own blood. So we get an idea that he is sacrificed, that he has been involved in the fighting. Scabandari, on the other hand, has flown through the remnants of other people's fighting, much more hanging back, whereas it seems that Silchas Ruin has been in the fore. So these two very different characteristics being revealed through this description. Most of his upper armor had fallen away. So we really get a sense that Silchas Ruin has been in serious battle, whereas Scabandari's standing there going, yes, look at my cloak. Isn't my cloak awesome? It almost seems like he hasn't been in battle at all. The blue-green of his veins and arteries tracking branching paths beneath the thin, hairless skin of his chest. Now, what is interesting here is, for someone who is Tistandi, who we know are that onyx jet black, Silchas Ruin is translucent skin and see-through and red eyes. So he's an albino. This is not your typical Tistandi. And again, that idea of, like, so he, in contrast to Scabandari has the iron grey skin of the Teast Eater. Silchas Ruin, although a Tistandi, is an albino. White hair, pale, white, almost translucent skin, so that you can actually see his veins and arteries. And he is hairless. And this is a bizarre little thing. Sometimes in fantasy, the idea of the hairy chest being seen as a symbol of virility, of masculinity. And here we have hairless skin of his chest, which could be seen as a deficit. It could be seen as, less manly than, say, Scabandari. But at the same time, if we think of those great athletes, the gymnasts, the weightlifters, all of these powerful competitors who are in peak physical condition, swimmers, these Olympic athletes, quite often have shaved chests. Everything about Silchas Ruin is this peak physical performance, not carrying an ounce more weight than he needs to, apart from his hair. The twin scabbards at his hips were empty. He had broken both weapons, despite the weavings of sorcery invested in them. Where Scabandari has a two-handed sword and a bunch of knives at his hip, Silchas Ruin has arrived and his weapons are gone because he's fought so much that his weapons broke in the battle, despite the fact that they were magical weapons. Again, this emphasis on Silchas was in the thick of it. He was in the middle of it. His had been a desperate battle. So what does that tell us about Scabandari? Scabandari was not in battle, not in the same way. We know that Scabandari and Silchas had used units to distract the Skykeeps, flown up, and then blown them up with magic. Fair enough, that happened because that's Scabandari was flying through the mist of the blood on his way back. But now we realize that when that had happened, Silchas Ruin flew down and was protecting his troops, whereas Scabandari didn't. So what does that tell you about Scabandari? What does that tell you about Silchas Ruin? So as I said, this was just a quick little look at two passages, and you can see they're done in almost exactly the same way, revealing the same things about each character, working down through them. But how Silchas's description ends with "he had been in a furious battle," which is missing from Scabandari's description, shows you that point of contrast. It shows you this little description is actually revealing far more about the two. So I thought that was at least of a little bit of interest. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.